Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here. So I finally have one of the team comp video ready, and it's the HyperCarry comp. Ayato in a HyperCarry comp, meaning he's the main carry. There's gonna be a hyper dance to the other members in the team. I'll talk about what is in the comp. I'll talk about the rotation, the two options that we have. We'll compare them and look at the damage with the full team buffs, how Ayato will fare. I'll do a comparison against Itto as well, because that's what we've been doing in the previous math guide, so let's keep it constant. Then I'll do a TLDR, and we'll talk about what's coming next. So first off, the comp itself. We got Kazuha, obviously, right? Nimble for pulls, resistance shred, and his elemental damage buff, along with if you have Freedom Swan, it gives you attack and any buff as well. The budget version is obviously Sucrose for this. The next is our all-time favorite 6-star hero, Bennett, giving attack buff, 4-piece Noblesse buff, as well as healing from his burst, and our Giga Chat Ayato, and Yunjin, providing the any flat damage bonus, any bonus from C2, any attack speed from C6. Obviously not everyone has these constellations, but I'll just bring that up so that people know what's the synergy involved. Now this comp, the advantage that Ayato has over, say, someone like Yoimiya who has no resistance to interruption, because Ayato does have it during his E, it allows him to drop shield and get Yunjing, which means your entire team basically exists to buff his E, which is pretty amazing stuff. Now, the other reason we can use Yunjing is also because Ayato's energy regeneration is pretty good based on the previous math guides, and we should not require a Hydro Battery with 130 ER. C2 Yunjing gives 15% NA bonus, C6 gives you 15% NA attack speed. So, synergy, like I said. In the Yunjin Math Guide series, right, I've already shared that Rainbow comp. That's not mandatory for Yunjin's buff. But it's nice that we can fully utilize it here. If you notice, it's a Rainbow comp, right? Animal, Pyro, Hydro, Joe. For C6 Yunjin with C4 Ayato, there is a total of a 27% attack speed increase, so I am going to take it that we get extra 1 more strike in each E, and it's going to trigger the echoes as well, so it's 7 out of 15 instead of 6 out of 14. Honestly, if not for hit lag, I would say 7 out of 16, but for now we'll go conservative until we have the chance to actually try it out in gameplay. So let's see how he fares with 3 buffers, because this sounds really OP, right? So first, let's look at the rotation. I have 2 options here in terms of rotations. Not gonna lie, these rotations are the reason why the video has taken quite a bit of time to prepare. Because I was trying my best to find an optimal rotation to squeeze 2E into as short of a rotation as possible without damaging his overall DPS. But unfortunately, it can't be done. With all the characters doing their buff, we will have quite a setup time. If you look at the rotation here, you notice that my Bennett is not using his E right after Q or before Q. Yunjing also not using her E before Q. And you have Kazuha still using, because we still need the pull, right? We need the pull on mobs, we need that crowd control. And then the rest is right after Ayato's E, you have the other characters doing their elemental skill to gain back energy, so that Ayato's Q will be ready when its cooldown is ready. This is a nicely matching 20-second cooldown. Now, the first rotation focuses on buffing his E and sacrifices Bennett's Q on Ayato's Q. If you notice, Ayato's Q is cast first. So in other words, your Ayato Q is not going to get Bennett's buff. I'll talk more about that later. You see here, right? But the whole reason why we are doing this is so that Ayato's E gets the full 6 seconds of buff, the last 6 seconds of buff on Bennett's, because Bennett lasts 12 seconds. In other words, after Bennett casts his burst, this is a 6-second setup. I've actually tried in-game. We have all these 3 characters in-game right now. So I already went to Spiral Abyss and try out and then do a frame-by-frame analysis to make sure that the timing is correct. So in order to last throughout, we have also dropped Bennett E and Yunjing E to speed up the rotation setup. Now, look at this glaring red sentence here. Okay, you can only drop Bennett Yu and Yunjing E, which is their elemental skills, only if you use Fervonious Lance on Yunjing. Otherwise, you're just not gonna get enough energy particles. Without enough energy particles, no matter how high your ER is, you're not gonna get the energy back. Now, if Fervonious effect did not trigger on her Q, you will have to use E, which is bad, right? Because your banner buff will then expire 1 second earlier than Ayato first E ending. And if enemies are too far apart, you can use Kazuha hold on the E instead of press. But you know, it's gonna expire 1 second earlier. And then can you imagine if both of these happen together, you're gonna get 2 seconds less of your banner buff on Ayato. That's gonna be pretty bad. And in fact, you will miss not just 2 seconds of Bandit's buff, but you'll miss 1 second of Yunjing. So there are a lot of things to set the rotation going correctly. So number one, obviously you buff your you build your Yunjing so that with Fervonious she still has a decent enough CR. Right now my Yunjing has 56 CR. Can definitely be improved, but at the same time I'm trying to balance it by giving her high enough defense so that her buff is also decent. Because unlike Goro, she does need to build her defense. Goro really literally does not need to build his defense for him. It does not affect his buffing capabilities at all. That's how good Goro is. Okay, but that's a bit off topic. So let me go on to talk about why we are not buffing Ayato's Q. I know it feels bad not to buff it, especially since it's snapshots, right? And it's 18 seconds of duration. But in a Ayato HyperCarry, he is the main DPS, so the focus on E is correct. And my current Q figures are assuming all 32 strikes hit the same opponent, be it AoE or exact target. Because what we saw with all the strikes hitting being able to hit the same opponent are all based on the opponents already together. So we don't have enough information on his Q right now. Sorry, this should be Q. If Ayato's Q has the same limit as Ganyu per humanoid size target, which is basically 10, because if you don't know how Ganyu burst works, right, it's very simple. She can do 50 icicles, 50 strikes in total in her burst. Each target gets hit a maximum of 10 times. But if all 5 enemies are bound together, no, okay, I shouldn't say bound together, but they have been put together, each of the strike that is targeted at each individual enemy will hit everyone, and everyone gets all 50 strikes. So if Ayato's 32 strikes follows the same concept or principle, it means that whatever figures I'm doing right now for his burst, we need to reduce it by 2/3, i.e. we divide it by 3, if we only have one single humanoid size target. If you want to know more about how Ganyu's burst works, I recommend you to check out the video where I did send her for Ganyu Freezecom, because I covered that in detail. I even talk about which are the mobs that you get more targets on, more hits on, more than 10 because of size. So because of this, right, we may have a limitation where the actual damage contribution for his Q in the HyperCarry comp, especially against a single target boss, will be even lower. So I'm being very generous to his Q figures right now, even if I'm not buffing it. And all the more I should not buff it, because if in the HyperCarry comp, okay, let's face it, you're gonna use a HyperCarry comp mainly for boss. So if this limit applies, all the more the burst damage is even lesser than his E. Look at his constellations, look at his weapon, it's all geared towards buffing his E, honestly speaking. So that is why we are focusing on buffing his E in this rotation. And you'll need about 130 to 140% ER, even with Fervonious Lance on Yunjing. Why? Because you only have one E, right? Previously, in my previous math guides, when we were solo, we were talking about having 2 E's in a 20-second rotation. Right now, we only have 1 E. Now, what if we do 2 E's? I got you covered. So, if you want to do 2 E's, it's going to be a 26-second rotation. Why? Because look at how streamlined this portion here is. There is no way I can reduce this any further. You can't drop your Kazuha E because you need to pull the mobs together. Okay, so there's no way for me to streamline this further. The only difference between this and this is that there's an Ayato E added after the very last Kazuha E, allowing you to, which is why the rotation adds for 6 seconds by the way. But this thus allows you to make good use of Ayato's E having a 12-second cooldown, because when you see here, 6 seconds of Ayato E gone, you have 6 seconds left. This will take you about 6 seconds, and then your Ayato E is ready again. And because you are doing 2x E, you can afford to drop your ER even further, and your Ayato goes with 100% ER, which means 0 ER stats. Now, this is obviously tough because Favonius Lance is required on your Yunjing for Ayato to go 100% ER with 2 SE. So you gotta have Favonius Lance. Without Favonius Lance, you don't even need to think about this. Or you can think about this, but you're not gonna be able to do 100% ER. One thing I just want to point out is that in the 1 E per rotation above, the Ayato E can be 20 seconds and it will still work. You can literally go through the rotation and realize that his Ayato E can have a 6-second uptime with a 20-second cooldown, and this rotation will still work. No impact to it. But the 2E per rotation does seek to utilize the low 12-second cooldown on Ayato's E to reduce his ER requirement, but in return your rotation is extended. It's a 26-second rotation, not a 20-second rotation. But in return you get more, you focus more on your DPS on Ayato stats. So how will it look like? Don't worry, I'm here for you guys. But before that, the second Ayato E here is actually going to be unbuff. You look through the whole rotation, it's going to be unbuff other than 2 seconds of Kazuha's elemental damage bonus, of which the first second is your Ayato casting the water illusion and setting himself into position for his E. So for simplification of my math, I'm just going to take it that there's no buffs at all for the second Ayato E, because I can tell you just that 1 second of the Kazuha bonus without all the other buffs, it's not gonna make a huge difference in the big picture of things. So, okay, remember we are not doing any. We are assuming that the second E has no buffs. In reality, you will just get 1 second of Kazuha's elemental damage bonus. So yeah, forget about it. So let's see if the extended rotation with better Ayato stats will be better or worse than this 20-second rotation with a little more ER invested on your Ayato. Let's look at the damage. Okay, this is his damage with full team buffs. Now let's talk about the buff characters. Maybe in future I may do a more F2P version in terms of the supports, but right now let's look at fully built. So a fully built Bandit, I think I've covered this in many of my previous math guides before. Bandit is a popular buffer in all of my math guides because he's just a popular buffer in the entire game anyway. So level 19 Bandit, C5, level 13 burst with level crowned burst with level 90 Aquila. You can use Mist-Splitter, it will give you the same result, but it's a waste because Mist-Splitter is so good on other DPS characters. And he has 202.8 ER. You got your Kazuha stats here, 985 EM with R5 FS giving you 40% attack, 32% AACA from R5 FS. You got the 47 cryo damage bonus with a C2 EM boost as well, and 40% resistance strat for PSVB, and he has about 122.7 ER. I'm using my actual character stats to do my math. R1 FS is assumed when Ayato is using R1 Haran, R5 FS for R5 Haran. Straightforward stuff. We now have a fully built Yunjing here, level 90, C6, level 12 burst with level 90 for Favonius Lance, 195.5 ER, 56.7 CR. Because of Favonius, I have to mention his her CR, so yeah, it's 56.7. And her defense is 2586 at C with the C4 effect is about 2733. Although we won't really get to utilize it because we are using Q without E in order to make our rotation faster. I'll just show you guys what we have. Okay. let's look at the damage. You have the Ayato 130 ER and the Ayato 100 ER, which means this is the two different rotations. You have the 20-second rotation damage here and the 26-second rotation damage here, but this right now is still only looking at their individual skill, so only the 6 seconds. So you see here, best case scenario at C0R1 with 4 piece echoes hitting 8 triggers, you'll do about 5-7k damage in 6 seconds. That's almost 100k per second. Looking pretty good, right? But this just hits 6 seconds of joy. Okay, it doesn't include all the rest of the actions that actually require in the rotation. And look at the Q. Okay, the Q damage. Even with me, assuming that it's 32 strikes, it falls off a lot from the E, seeing as we are not buffing the Q. But like I said, in a Ayato HyperCarry, with him being the main DPS, his buff is not, his Q is not your main damage source, unlike say in a example in a Fischl. But I'll talk more about Fischl when we get there. So these are the damage figures. You'll see that there's even a 1 million figure, a couple of 1 million figure. Actually, all the R5, all the 6 R5 can hit 1 million in 6 seconds of his E, with the highest being 1.07 million, with 8 triggers on the echoes. And this is with 130 ER. With 100 ER, you get even better. See, the 1.07 is now 1.09. It's only slightly better. You realize that it's only slightly better, right? If I look at a C0R1 figure, look at this. It's only 10k better. Which is to be expected, because when you drop your 130 ER to 100 ER, you're not gaining crit stats. Because my 130 ER is based on base ER rolls, 0 upgrades to it. Obviously, the actual artifact upgrade may turn out differently, but in a more or less ideal scenario, it doesn't give you much of a gain. But it still has slightly higher, better damage than a Ayato 130 to 140 ER. But this is not accurate because we gotta look at the full rotation. We have one that's 20 seconds and one that's 20 seconds. So this is the 20-second rotation figure. Okay. This is divided by 20 seconds, this is divided by 26 seconds. Highest potential, you'll see it's not that big of a difference, right? Even at C0R1, the difference will be bigger at C0R1 comparison. Now let's look at the percentage figures here. Okay, first off, there are no negative figures, which means that the 20-second rotation is better than the 26-second rotation in all scenarios, which is kind of no-brainer. Because in the first place, the shorter your rotation, the better your DPS is. It's as simple as that. However, the difference between the 20 and the 26-second rotation, it does drop as constellation level increases. As you see, C0 going to C6, C0 going to C6. Although between C3 and C6, C6 does have an increase in the gap. Now, it also increases as your number of 4 echoes trigger increase. Yeah? Straightforward stuff. Oh, actually it does drop in certain scenarios as well. No, sorry. Because I put the 4 triggers here, okay? This is the average, this is the low, this is high. So you gotta compare from here to here to here. So it does drop. Okay, it goes from 2.3 to 2.2 to 2.0, example. But like I said, the difference is because this phenomenon is happening here because you are getting more HP percentage base rolls by dropping ER. So you extend to gain from the C2 and C3 more. And your chance in triggers here, I'm actually doubling it because it's 2 E's per rotation. But it's not very okay because you know, right? I've already covered how the 4 echoes work. If you have not seen that video, please check that out. I'll put it in the top right corner or in the in-video links as well, in the description as well for that matter. But essentially, the chance of getting 8 triggers in both your E's in that 26 seconds, it's going to be much harder than even just getting one of it. So yeah, like I said, not very accurate on the point, but the comparison still holds. The overall finding still holds, which is 20-second rotation is better. And yeah, like I said, the 1.6% here is actually 9 triggers, it's not 8 triggers, because remember I said C6 with C4 Ayato effect with C6 Yunjin gives you 27% attack speed buff, which is why we are I have done the math here based on 9 triggers, although I know that I say it's 8 triggers here, because it is 8 triggers for all of these figures here, except this. Okay. So let's talk about the conclusion, because I think that's easy to follow, right? C0, go for 20-second rotation and build Ayato with 130 to 140 ER. Kinda no-brainer, okay? The difference is it's pretty much around 6%. 5 to 6%. C6, yeah, this is your percentage figures. It's slightly lower, but personally I'll still say 20-second rotation is better. It's still slightly better. It's also more satisfying to see to consistently see bit numbers on your E's. But since they're so close, you do have the added flexibility of going for both options, depending on how your artifacts turn out. Like if your echoes artifact are absolutely horrendous, and maybe you can go for your HOD sense, and also depending whether you can get ER, right? Mainly whether you can get ER. Sorry, mainly whether you can get ER. If you can't get a good 4 echo set with 130 ER, you might have to settle with 100 ER on this, or maybe 130 ER on this, 100 ER on this. Really depends on how your artifact goes. But I want to give a very important warning here, okay? If you go for 26-second rotation, it will be pretty frustrating to see your high echo trigger on the unbuff E. 20 seconds will be less tilting in that sense, okay? Seriously. If you have ever played any RNG games, you know. Okay, you know this. It's gonna be very irritating when you finally see high triggers and it ends up on your unbuff E. Oh my god. Alright, so that is it for the comparison between the 10-second and 26-second rotation. Now let's talk about Ayato versus Itto. If you see my thumbnail, you'll see that I'm saying that Ayato is broken and not broken at the same time. Why is that? You'll see shortly. So this is my Itto figures with the full buff, with the full team buffs. This is Ayato with HOD and with echoes. This is the percentage differences. You notice that we no longer have any red percentage figures, unlike this solo comparison. In fact, the percentage figures are actually quite significantly in favor of Itto. Just look at this, which is 54%. But why is this happening? Because once you bring in your team buff and you consider your full rotation, you realize that I can't get 2 SE without affecting our rotation, right? And I literally showed you guys a 2E rotation versus a 1E rotation. The 1E still does better. Although it's slightly better, but it still does better. Slightly better at C6. C1 is decent enough of a difference to justify just going straight for 1E per rotation. So your Ayato actually falls off against Itto because of this. Because when we did solo, we were doing 2 E's per rotation nicely within the 18 seconds. Obviously, his DPS is going to be very good. So now that we have time to really deep dive into the rotation, I'm sorry, at C0, Ayato is 10 to 25% lower than Itto. At C6 is a huge 54 to 67% lower. And my C0, by the way, my C0 C2 Itto figures here assume C2 plus Goro. Ayato actually has C4 Yunjin all the way before C6 Ayato. So it's kinda unfair. Kinda tilting towards in favor of Ayato, if you ask me. So yeah, that's that. It's okay, it's not that big of a difference. It's okay, because it doesn't change this. The percentage difference is just too big. So as I've mentioned several times in previous math guides, right, once we include the full team buffs and rotation, results may change, and change it did. So given the updated math above, it does look like Ayato is in tier A DPS or maybe worse, and definitely not broken tier. But I want to add a fair statement for Ayato, because I know people are gonna bash me if I don't do this. Okay, especially the Ayato sims and wanters. The figures are based on full rotation. So you got a 20-second rotation here, and for Itto, it's 17 to 18 seconds. Okay? Or 15 seconds if you're C2. The thing about Ayato is that he's actually very bursty in nature. Just think about it, right? It's short 6 seconds in that 20-second rotation when he does majority of his damage. So he's very bursty in that nature. And his buff E, when I was going through the damage figures, I told you guys, right? He's dealing 1.07 million damage at C6R5 with 9 triggers in 6 seconds of DPS. It's actually really good. Of course, you can't just look at the 6 seconds of DPS. Let's just talk about the 8 seconds of setup as well. So that's 14 seconds. 14 seconds dealing 1.07 million damage is still pretty good. And his Q also contributes a little. His Q does about 140k damage by then, because it's 14 out of 18 seconds. But remember, there's a potential 2/3 reduction for his Q. But what all of this means is that Itto's 1.45 million in 15 seconds versus Ayato's 1.21 million, because I add the E and the Q together, in 14 seconds. I'll say Ayato is at the threshold of broken tier, or maybe at the broken tier, in terms of its upfront burst in damage. It's only about 12% lower than Itto, this 97139 versus this 86560. So if the enemies you are facing dies in this 1.21 million damage, Ayato only loses out to Itto slightly. Pretty much the same. I'll say it's more or less the same. Same, almost broken. You can call him almost broken, you can just call him broken. That's up to you. But the thing is this, okay? When enemies have phases that drag beyond 14 seconds, because that's his 8 second setup and 6 second. I know I said 6 second setup for Bennett's buff, but remember we are casting Ayato 2 seconds cast animation before Bennett's buff. So total 8 seconds of setup plus 6 seconds of actual DPS, 14 seconds. But if your enemies have phases that drag beyond these 14 seconds, or they have higher than 1.21 million HP, the difference between your two will start to really show in that type of scenario. And your Ayato DPS will just plunge in comparison to Itto. So bear that in mind. I wanted to give you guys a different perspective or alternative view, where we see that Ayato bursty damage still good. He's still very broken in his 6 seconds. It's just that in terms of overall rotation, because of him only having 6 second uptime, he falls off quite a fair bit versus Itto, who's really high damage plus consistent damage output. Now, one last point. He looks pretty F2P friendly, being able to dish out 520 to 570k at C0R1 in 6 seconds of fully buff E. But remember this with fully built supports. And his C0 to C6 increment looks really low in terms of overall DPS. I'll confirm this when I do the deep dive on the constellation comparison. That will come in a while. So I don't know, he kind of reminds me of Ayaka, and I'll talk about that later. So to conclude, right, because I talk so much, let me just do a conclusion. He's basically a very bursty DPS that's strong at C0, almost broken at C6 if you just look at the bursty portion, so the 14 seconds, including the buff setup. Absolutely broken if you only look at the 6 seconds of DPS. It's higher than Itto, by the way, because it's 179k versus Itto 145k. If I only look at their DPS window, both of them. So 179 versus 145, and if I include Q, it's 190 versus 145k. So he's dealing a lot more damage than Itto in his DPS window, which is shorter than Itto. So he's definitely more bursty than Itto. I'll give him that for sure. But you know, if you only look at the 6 seconds and somehow ignore the buff setup energy regen after, yeah, maybe you can say that he's absolutely broken. But don't kid yourself, you're gonna need this and this for him to do this amount of damage. So yeah. But he's not broken and he's just okay once you look at full rotations. Once you include this and this. It's just okay. So that's why I say he's kind of similar to Ayaka in the C0 being good, being strong enough, and together with a bursty aspect to his damage. But at least Ayaka can do N2C or N3C during her burst up downtime. Ayato maybe just his burst dealing damage. This is one thing I don't like. I'll say his biggest downfall is pretty much his 14-second downtime and 20-second rotation. Because like I said, the burst. When you're in a hyper carry comp, the burst damage really falls off a lot versus his E. Well, there are 2 more comps that I will look at, Freeze and Taser comp. Maybe those are where his strengths may lie, and not being a single strong main DPS in hyper carry comp. Because right now, he's broken if you look at only his 6 seconds, but if you look at the full rotation, he's not broken. This is why I say he's like broken and not broken at the same time. Very conflicted about him, honestly. I like his animations, but his DPS is, yeah, contradicting or conflicting, however you want to call it. Let me just say this point again, right? Because I know there are people who will tunnel vision just look at the 6 seconds. You look at just the 6 seconds, yes, he is definitely top tier. Freaking broken for that matter. But without the 8 seconds of buff setup, he will not be able to do the damage. Without the 6-second energy regen from his team members E after that, he will not be able to do it every E. So those should be included in his DPS in my opinion. That's how I have been approaching all my math guides, by the way. Ever since I started doing rotations, I've always been looking at the entire rotation itself. So, we are now at the TLDR session of the video. I know a lot of people jump to this, so I try to be as concise and clear in the points for the TLDR session. And here we go. We're going to talk about HyperCarry comp, rotations, 20-second rotation versus 26-second rotation, comparison against Itto, and we do a conclusion. Alright, so first off, Ayato with his good energy regeneration plus Favonius Lance on Yunjing can avoid the need for a Hydro Battery, because Hydro Resonance is absolute crap. There's no way to sugarcoat it, it's just crap. With his increased resistance to interaction during his E, he can drop shield as well. Thus, Ayato can go for triple buffers, Kazuha, Bennett, Yunjing. Let's look at the rotations with the 3 of them buffing him in a HyperCarry comp. So you have a 20-second rotation, you do 1 E, your Ayato has 330 to 140 ER. This is the rotation, I'm not going to go through them in step by step. You can pause and just check it out for yourself. 26-second rotation is 2E, 100 ER, essentially the same as the 20-second rotation but adding a Ayato E at the end. So like I said, 26-second rotation basically has a E at the end. Both rotations focus on getting buffs on his full 6 seconds of E, thus no buff for his Q. This is the very first thing that we use, so no buffs. And you're doing no E on Banner and Yunjing. Because like I said, you gotta speed up your rotation. And Favonius Lamps is absolutely mandatory for Yunjing here. Yeah? Otherwise, you're not gonna get enough energy. Yeah, we are literally using the Favonius Lance to compensate for not using E and on Banner and Yunjing. And if Favonius Lance doesn't proc on Yunjing Q, E will have to be used. If it doesn't proc for E as well, you're gonna have to do normal attacks. All these are just early buff expiries for Ayato, so please build your Yunjing CR. That's all. That's the gist of what I'm trying to say here. That's not so bad, right? Use a CR circlet. 20-second rotation versus 26-second rotation. 20-second is better in all scenarios. However, difference drops as constellation level increases and number of 4 echoes triggers increases. From C0, you have at C0 you have 5.3 to 5.9% difference. At C6 is 1.6 to 2.3% difference. Now, for C0, definitely go for the 20-second rotation and build your Ayato with 130 to 140 ER. Make sure you have Vervanilance on your Yunjin, otherwise, it can't work. Or either the rotation goes longer or you need to build a lot more ER on each character. I don't recommend that. Now, for C6, since the difference is kinda small, you have the added flexibility of going for either option, depending on how your artifacts turn out. In terms of which one gets you the 130, which one gets you the 100 ER, right? That's the main difference between the two rotations. Well, also the second E. But personally, even if you are C6, right, I would recommend 20-second rotation to see consistently high numbers on your E, and more importantly, to avoid frustration in seeing high number of 4 echoes trigger on your unbuff E, and low triggers on your buff E. It's gonna be very painful. Youch. Okay. So, straightforward stuff so far for the TLDR, right? The com, who's in there, rotations. Alright, I forgot to mention the TLDR. Sucrose is obviously the budget or 4-star replacement for Kazuha. So you have all 4-star characters here. Okay. Rotations, 20-second versus 26 rotation, or 1E versus 2E rotation. Now let's talk about the full team buffs. Since 1E has been removed from rotation, and 2E actually has lower DPS with buff etc. included in the whole rotation, naturally Ayato falls off against Itto in the overall rotation DPS, because remember when we compare Ayato solo versus Itto solo, he had 2Es in the 18-second or 20-second rotation. So with 1E being removed, obviously he's gonna fall off, man. At C0, 10 to 25% lower than Itto. At C6 is a huge 54 to 67% lower. That's painful. And looking at his overall DPS rotation, I'll say he's at tier A or worse, which is kinda disappointing, I know. But fear not for the Ayato Sims and Ayato Wanters, because let me offer an alternative view here. Ayato is actually bursty in nature. Think about it. 6 seconds only on his uptime in his E. And he does 1.07 billion damage. At C6 R5, 9 triggers, 9 echo triggers in 6 seconds of DPS and 8 seconds of setup. And his Q dealing about this amount of damage. I mean, it's kinda copium if you only compare the 14 seconds instead of the 20 seconds. But it's okay because he is a bursty DPS, right? I know people are gonna complain to me and say that he's a bursty DPS, you should look at his burst effect. Or rather his bursty nature. Okay. So if I compare that, Itto's 1.45 million in 15 seconds versus Ayato's 1.21 million in 14 seconds. And this 15 seconds includes setup, by the way, as well. Okay, it's actually almost broken. And 12, he's only about 12% lower than Itto. So that's really good. But this is his RF. However, fights that drag beyond 14 seconds or more than 1.21 million of damage is required, you're gonna see your Ayato's DPS plunge across tiers. If you drop all the way to tier B, because it's just not dealing damage during that period. As you try to gain energy back for the entire team, it's not dealing damage. If you go full ostrich mode, putting your head into the sand, and look only at the 6 seconds of DPS, he's absolutely broken. Okay, he's absolutely broken. 179k versus Itto 145k, or 190k if you include the Q, versus Itto 145k. Obviously for Itto, this is 10 seconds of his DPS, so 145k, 1.45 million, right? So 179k or 190k versus 145k. Wow, He is dealing a lot of damage. He is absolutely broken in during the 6 seconds. But if you look at the entire rotation, then, you know, it is no longer broken. If you look at the whole rotation, he's a whopping 54 to 67% lower than Itto. So this is why I say he's broken and not broken at the same time. Really depends on how you view it. But personally, I'll talk more about the conclusion later. Fourth point, his damage at C0 is 520k to 570k, thereabout, with fully build supports, which does make him kind of F2P friendly, right? Because he's looking strong at C0. And also because the C0 C6 is not looking good at the moment, so, you know, it feel even better if you just go C0 on him. Now, I'll deep dive into this in the constellation comparison. I'll probably look at his E, I'll probably look at his overall DPS, etc. So, conclusion. In a HyperCarry comp, Ayato is a bursty DPS that's pretty strong at C0. Almost broken at C6 if you ignore the 6 seconds of energy regen after his E. And absolutely broken at C6 if you ignore the 8 seconds. Okay, actually I shouldn't say at C6, right? Because even at C0, if you look at only the DPS window, then yes, he is pretty broken for a C0 level of DPS. If you ignore the 8 second buff setup and 6 seconds of energy regen after his E. So like I say, full on ostrich mode. Put your head in the sand and only look at what you want to see, which is the 6 seconds of E. And okay to good only in terms of full rotation. Sorry, I phrased that a bit differently. It's okay or good only in terms of full rotation. So I literally gave you guys 6 second view, 40 second view, and 20 second view. I gave you all 3 options now. So you guys decide. Okay? But for me personally, I'll look at full rotation for HyperCarry comp because you're not going to achieve those broken figures in his 6 seconds of E without the buff setup, the 8 second buff setup. And you're not going to be able to do it consistently without the 6 second energy regen after his first E as well. I know, I really feel like it's not right to not include those. But there is no denying that he has high burst in his DPS window, regardless of how you want to view it. Be it 6 seconds, 14 seconds, or 20 seconds. In his DPS windows of 6 seconds, he has high burst. There's no denying that. So, like I said, I'll leave it to you guys to decide for yourself as well with the figures presented. I'll say this, if you like bursty nature DPS with short DPS window, he is your cup of tea. I'm sorry, this got cut off a little. It's likely your cup of tea. Okay? Whew. So that's the TLDR for him. I hope the conclusion and the alternative view is something that you guys are able to follow and appreciate and decide for yourself whether he is someone that's broken for you or you want to look at 20 seconds and you realize that not that great. Okay, but here's the thing, right? I'll say this: when he goes live, you're gonna see a bunch of YouTubers show him dealing so much damage because they're only looking at the 6 seconds of E. Everyone is just gonna say that he's broken. So that sentiment might very well last all the way throughout the rest of the game. Because most people don't look at the buff setup. Most people don't look at the energy regen after. Because, by the way, I don't blame them. Because you see what you see. You can only appreciate what you see. What is tangible in front of you. Because those are the actual figures that you see, right? So, yeah. I do hope that me spending so much time to explain all of this do help you guys to appreciate and see those other factors that are not as tangible or visible. And you guys decide for yourself how you want to classify your Ayato. Now, video series, mainly I'll talk about HyperCarry is done. Okay, so I'm going to focus on Freeze comp and Taser comp next. So total 3 comps for him, obviously with the rotations as well. We'll do weapon comparison, Mid-Splitter, the 4-star weapons, I'll do constellation and refinement comparison, and no worries guys, I saw from the 4 Echoes video that a lot of people are interested in 4 Gladiators performance, so I do have plan to do the full artifact comparison, but I wanted to do it after the comps are done at least, because that way it's more accurate. with all the different buffs, all the different team members effect coming into play, it's more accurate. Because the comparison between 4 Glads and 4 HOD is gonna vary greatly, and it's very dependent on how many damage bonuses you are getting from all the different sources in your team and your weapon. Okay? So let me know in comments if there are any specific math you would like. I may have missed them, but if you don't want me to miss the comments, just join me over at Twitch where I answer almost every question there as well. And this is my Twitch link. I'm sorry, this is my Twitch link. The link is in the description as well. So go ahead and join me there, yeah? Alright, thanks everyone for watching. I think this is the longest Ayato math guide so far. If you like the content, remember to like the video and click subscribe for more. Bye!